What's up guys, MikeCoco back here, bringing you guys a new video on the costumes of the month for August. I know I'm 2 weeks late, but I just finished school, so yeah, I didn't really have time to make the video for this. But anyway, we have two costumes for August, slightly different from the three costumes a month, but it's for Anak and Prince Arthur. So just going into stats really quickly, they're both 10% buffs towards attack, defense, and HP. So on the basis of that, they're pretty much identical. However, the skill that comes along with the costume changes a little bit. So Anak's costume changes her skill just slightly. So instead of just having an attack debuff, she gets an attack and defense debuff along with it. Now this may seem like decent to begin with because more defense buffs means, or defense debuff rather, means that you can just reduce or remove any of your defense debuffers. The problem with this is that Anak's skill is a controlling skill, and so against enemies or bosses that are controlling immune, such as like stun or bewitches like Taihu, Mythic Raid, or Sara, because they're immune to control attacks, that means none of her skill actually applies. So the attack debuff doesn't get applied, and the defense debuff doesn't get applied either. So in reality, if you're using this in Mythic Raid, it really doesn't do much at all because it never applies the effect of defense and attack debuffs. So you're better off just using the original skill with no costume, because all you get is a 10% attack boost with the skill. So in that sense, for PvE, the skill is actually not that great, and even for PvP, such as IB, defense debuffs generally they don't work that well, because usually if you're strong enough, you will one-shot the other player. Even having a defense debuff doesn't really allow you to go from a non-one-shot to a one-shot scenario. So in PvP, the costume is not that great either. So all in all, Anak's costume is slightly disappointing. Now, of course, back then when I first reviewed Lacita's costume, I said that even though there was a defense debuff of 40%, it also didn't apply because Lacita's skill is also a control skill. The difference is Lacita has a base 75% attack up, so when you're stacking the costume's 10%, it all gets factored into the additional self buff that Lacita has. But Anak doesn't have that. All she has is a critical buff, which means that her skill base damage is the same as all other heroes that have 1.89 skill damage factor. So in that sense, Anak's skill is slightly disappointing. Now moving on to Prince Arthur, he already had a very unique skill, and his costume actually doesn't change that much. It just increases his own defense by 50%. Now, I don't actually own Arthur, so that's why it says 150% here, but when you're max rank, or max level rather, at level 100, this is a 250% buff. So I don't believe this 50% increases to 100%, because that would be like double your defense, but basically it's just a defense buff, but you get a 10% attack buff with it. And remember, Prince Arthur has his own self buff, so in a way it's actually a lot similar to Lacita's costume, where the attack buff is applied onto himself, and then the 75% buff increases more. So basically you're stacking more attack, which is always good because Arthur has a self buff, so it works similarly to Lacita. So I would highly advise getting Arthur's costume, even if you don't get him, or even if you don't have him. I'm planning to purchase Arthur's costume simply because Anak's costume is not that great. It's not that useful in a sense, and for Prince Arthur, it would just increase his attack. And if you get him, or if you're lucky enough to get him, because most people have received, I think, 2 6-star versions of him from the contest. So if you do get him, or try to transcend him, or not transcend, descent. If you try to descend him, definitely worth trying to get his costume. So my opinion is go for Prince Arthur's costume, because his damage is very, very good, better than Anak's, and at this point of the game, a lot of the controlling skills are actually worse than non-controlling skills, because none of the rest of the effects will get applied. So yeah, I do think Prince Arthur's costume is the way to go. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Peace.